Welcome to Crop Talk, brought to you by Innovative Ag Services, and this is our field scouting special. Each week from March through October, our agronomy team shares timely, boots-on-the-ground updates from across the IAS geography, so you can make confident decisions as the seasons change. Today, you'll hear a quick regional update from our IAS agronomists, including what we're seeing in the fields right now, what to keep an eye on next, and a few practical scouting reminders you can put to work this week. I'm your host, Nicholas Giesman. Let's get things kicked off this week. I'm going to send it over to Owen Heatland in our Northwest region. Owen, what do you got for us?
This is Owen Heatland in the Northwest region, covering Hardin, Grundy, Butler, and Franklin counties. Again, we've been wet like we have the last couple weeks. Hopefully this week it looks like we'll start to dry out and continue to see things move along. Corn is looking very good. We had the wind event probably 2 weeks ago, and it looks like most of the corn has stood back up. Very little green snap, a little bit of goosenecking, but overall looks really, really good. Bean spraying, we are probably, I would say, 75 to 90% done. Second pass on beans. And as Nicholas alluded to, we'll talk a little bit about respraying in beans, as we already have guys that will probably, us included, start to pull the trigger on some resprays in areas where the water hemp got, a little bit out of control. Other than that, not really seeing a whole lot. Corn is, fully switched over to the root mass, moving down and starting to get into some of the nitrogen. I would fully expect us to start to see some yellowing, maybe some compaction and nitrogen issues in areas, especially in manured ground. Beans are a little bit yellow in spots because it has been so wet and a little bit cooler, but it looks like after rain tomorrow, we finally start to heat up a little bit more and slow the rain down. So I would expect those to start to switch off and turn a little bit greener. With that, I will kick it up to the Northeast to Melissa.
Thanks, Owen. Melissa Schumann here in our Elkader office, covering Clayton County in the extreme northeast corner of Iowa. And very similar to last week's update, we had rain events as well. So today we are finishing up the last of our post-corn, then going to be focusing heavy on post-bean applications here. Unlike Owen, this is just our second pass here, but still the water hemp is showing its ugly head and we're trying to get ahead of it. So that's kind of our main focus, and keep looking forward to the warmer days. The last couple of days of sunshine has really made a difference on the crops and helped them come out of the wet, soggy, sickly looking that they've had. So that's a great turn of events. I'm going to kick it down to Nicholas in our eastern region.
Thank you very much, Melissa, for that update from the north there. I'm Nicholas Giesman, covering the southeast region, mainly Dubuque and Jackson counties. Kind of the same thing going down here. We're wrapping up our corn spraying for the year after all these, wet rain days. So trying to get that accomplished here today, and then going to roll into kind of the post beans, just like you said there. We're the lucky ones. We don't have, the heavy pressure that they have out west. So we are just on our second pass as well. But I know there is a few guys that have already sprayed their second pass that are looking at, are we going to have to do a third pass here in a couple weeks to keep things clean before things get to the full canopy? We're seeing some early set disease coming in with all this moisture. We're really keeping an eye on that around here, watching out, especially for tar spot disease in hay fields, people pushing their cutting back here with all this moisture. Just really keeping an eye on stuff and, making sure we're staying on top of things down here. So, Owen, I know, we kind of both talked about resprays. It sounds like you're there, and we're going to be there, potentially going through the summer here on these beans. What are you looking at? How are you making decisions if it's a viable option to go out there? Is it sheerly, I see a weed, we're spraying it, or what are you guys looking at out west?
So spraying has been pretty spread out here. I mean, we have some beans that got sprayed 2.5 weeks ago. We got some beans that are getting sprayed today. So obviously, I would like to wait at least a week, if not 10 days, to see, what's going to happen to the water hemp. In some scenarios where we have very heavy weed pressure, you run into the weeds on top getting a good kill on those, but the weeds underneath not getting good coverage and not really doing much to those. That's a simple decision to go out and, going to have to respray those weeds. Where you ding them but don't kill them is a little bit harder discussion, but still, waiting that 7 to 10 days, looking at water hemp, and does it look like there's new growth out of the bottom? Because, to be honest, that's majority of what the weed issues is going to be, is water hemp. And then from there, you can look at the stage on the bean and decide, do we do just Liberty? Do we do Liberty and List? What do we do again? And then adjuvant load. Unfortunately, the last probably 10 days have not been super conducive for spraying Liberty. It's been cool. It's been a little bit cloudy. So you may see that Liberty not work as good as you had hoped to. But honestly, if you waited 10 days to spray, the water hemp are going to be extremely large. So most guys just had to spray, and that's what it is. So we'll continue to walk fields and look and see if, maybe this field needs sprayed, this one doesn't, depending on what the weed pressure was and how our pre's worked. Those are the main things I look at when I look at a respray.
When you're talking about, whether you're spraying Liberty and Enlist, at what point are you not spraying another residual on this respray? Is that you're just kind of going by timing, looking at how close the canopy? Because I know I'm always big and I don't like late season weeds. So if I'm making that trip, I see there's a value in always putting a residual in the tank if you're going out there to get the kill. Do you look into that as well? Or how are you just killing weeds? Or are you using the residual from earlier? Or what are you thinking on that end?
Really depends on situation by situation. Almost all, if not all, of our second pass had a pretty stiff residual in them. And so what I would do is look at, are you killing new weeds or are you killing weeds that didn't die? Because if you're killing weeds that didn't die and you don't have any new weeds coming, chances are your residual is doing its job. At that point, I probably just put the Liberty and Enlist in, because right or wrong, there is a little bit of antagonization the more products you add. That's just the nature of the beast when we spray earlier. So if you're trying to kill weeds that are already partially dead, they're harder to kill, you might be better off with just adjuvants, Liberty and Enlist comparatively. Now if you've got a bunch of flush of new water hemp coming, obviously we need more residual, so that's a different story. So really you got to scout the field and then figure out, what are we after? What's the stage of the beans? Are the beans almost closed? And we're just trying to get the water hemp that are there. Are they 30-inch beans and a long ways from closing? That again is a different scenario. So maybe you give a little insight into what you see out east, but out here the beans are getting some decent size. Every year there's more and more 15-inch beans, so a lot of those are getting close to closed. In that scenario, we're going to be doing a respray as soon as possible before those beans get closed, just because we want to try and get better coverage on those weeds. Whereas a 30-inch, maybe we wait a little longer on those.
And I think Melissa could probably second this. Our 30-inch beans, anywhere from 22 to 20, around there, it seems there's a lot of ground showing in between the rows still. I think that's going to progress here as we get some warmer weather and hopefully get out of this really wet ground that we've been having here with all the rains. I think the beans will kind of take off here. But right now, we're looking at going in our second pass. There is a lot of time, I think, before they get to full canopy and, shade that ground out. So we're looking at really stiff residuals right now, time frame wise for us. Melissa, what are you thinking on the northeast portion there?
Nicholas, you are exactly correct. I'm actually standing out in a bean field here now, and there is a lot of space. The beans have made a lot of progress in growing upwards, but we've still got a good 20-25-inch gap on a majority of our fields to fill before. So going without a residual around here is not going to be the best foot forward, especially if they continue with these rains in the forecast and such that way. Throwing back a question at you guys, when you're considering a respray, what stages do we want to get looking at for these beans before we have to look at what our tank mix partners, for growers out there listening?
I think the biggest thing is you're looking at, are they R1, are they starting to bloom, are they R2 full bloom, etc. We really hope we aren't getting into R3, because that means we're spraying really, really late. So looking at those things, and then looking at the label on Enlist and Liberty, and then honestly looking at, okay, if we don't spray, what kind of problem are we going to create? Because I've seen it time and time again where, maybe we don't spray and we're paying for those water hemp seeds for the next 3, 4, 5 years out here, especially. Now is the time that may seem a little early, especially you guys are making your second pass, but we're on to our third pass. Some of these beans have been sprayed a second time beginning of June. So we really need to decide, do we spray again, or do we think we'll be good for the rest of the year? And one thing I would comment on is, you guys talk about how you all have a lot of space in between rows. I think one of the probably bigger differences is we've really in this area and started to see a lot of guys plant beans before corn. Now this year was a little bit cooler, but we've got a lot of beans that were planted that last or second to last week in April. And so, those beans have been out there 2 months now. So if they're not closed yet, we're almost going to have to start looking at a third pass just because of the sheer amount of time that they've been in the ground.
So with that in mind, Owen, everybody is pushing the planting date and pushing it earlier and earlier. Do you think the reason we're having to come back on a third pass is because they are pushing that planting date so that first application is going so much earlier? Is our weed pressure getting higher, or is it a combination effect?
Somewhat of a combination here. Talking to anybody that's in eastern Iowa, especially in northeastern Iowa, our water hemp here is significantly, and I mean significantly worse than what is up there. We have guys that just plan on a 3-pass because they know that the water hemp pressure is that bad. If you've had issues in your corn before, we deal with a ton of seed corn around here, which creates a water hemp issue, unfortunately. And then I think the other thing is, if you look at planting beans on April 20th and you're spraying them on April 15th, you're going to spray your second pass, hopefully May 20th or May 25th. If they aren't closed, which they may not be, by June 20th, you're looking at time you would need another residual or another pass. So I think they both intertwine with each other. If you've got a really weedy field and you're planting it early, it might be time to just think about 3 passes. But if you've got a really good clean field, you might get away with 2 passes, especially if you have 15 or 20-inch beans, which there are a lot of. So it's a field by field scenario and something that you just got to walk the fields and see what's out there.
Oh, and I know you mentioned antagonism with your tank mixes and the more you put in there. Are you guys seeing any disease in the beans? Or I know a few years ago you guys had some spider mites. Are we too early to really watch for that and kind of pay for that trip with taking care of 2 things? Or are you more worried about weeds and not seeing the disease yet?
Definitely more worried about the weeds, not really seeing any disease. The only thing that I would consider spraying early for would be, if you have a white mold issue, which you guys probably honestly have more of issues than we do. There's a couple newer products that you would spray at R1. But honestly, unless the beans are early maturity, planted early, we're not seeing a fully into R1. Definitely seeing blooms, but not enough that I would pull that trigger yet. Now, maybe by the end of next week, you could kill 2 birds with 1 stone if you're doing an R1 pass. But fungicide, honestly, unless there's a reason to go super early, your best bang for your buck is R3, which is probably a month from now. And I think you get easy pay for the pass with what you gain, waiting. Insects really haven't seen hardly any. Spider mites are more of a dry issue. So unless we dry off significantly, I don't think we'll see any of those. Aphids is really, really early for that. And if you put product on now, you'd probably have residual that wouldn't carry you to that point, plus rain off. So I think your best bet is to worry about the weeds. Like I said, unless you're in a scenario where you have heavy white mold pressure, we've had a lot of rain, a lot of splashing up. That's definitely going to be a concern as we move forward. So if it lines up there, you're at full R1, I would definitely be something that you would consider, but that's a case by case basis, not on every field.
That's all for this week's Crop Talk by IAS. Thanks for tuning in. If any of our listeners have questions, feel free to email them to croptalk@innovativeag.com. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe so you don't miss next week's update. And if you know a fellow grower who'd value a quick field snapshot, share this episode with them. For more agronomy resources and to connect with your local IAS team, visit innovativeag.com and follow Innovative Ag Services on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn. We'll catch you next week on Crop Talk.